What's up, rockers? Welcome to another episode of the Talk Louder podcast, where we geek out on all things rock and roll. Hit that subscribe button on our YouTube channel. Leave us your likes and comments. You can also leave likes and comments on our Facebook page. Follow us on iTunes and Spotify. Also Instagram at talklouder_podcast. And of course, our website, talklouderpodcast.com. I'm Metal Dave Glessner, along with my co-host, Jason McMaster. And man, are we just honored today?
How do you top this for all the true dirty rock and roll people out there?
Yes,
the believers of if it doesn't have the boogie and the swagger and the volume and the power of Motorhead and the I can't even. There's so many things I could say. I'd feel like a preacher. Oh my God. Tell them who we had today.
Yes, we have all the way from Australia, Mr. Angry Anderson of Rose Tattoo is joining us on the Talk Louder podcast today, and I can't believe we're going to spend time in his company today. What an honor. It's about, what did we do? We did the math, and it's actually, we're doing this on Sunday evening here in Texas, but it's actually Monday morning in Australia. So I think we just finished dinner and he just finished breakfast. So we had to work out the time zones, but we were able to do that. We want to say thank you to Kat, his publicist, who's been very patient with us in putting this together. We went back and forth with so many emails trying to get our schedules synced up. So thank you, Kat, for making this happen.
This is my cue for thank you, sir, very much to Sean Ratches from Laughing Monkey Music Show. And thank you, Sean, so much for reaching out to Kat. And just, I don't know how, I know what it was. He saw my Rose Tattoo shirt. Yeah. And he was like, I've seen your podcast and you have a Rose Tattoo shirt sometimes. And I'm like, oh my God, yeah, like 5. And he's like, oh man, I've had Angry on a bunch of times. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
And so he was instrumental in getting us in touch with Kat. And so we really appreciate it. Thank you, Sean, from Laughing Monkey Music Show. Yeah. What a banger this was.
Yeah, man.
Holy shit. And I'll bum you out now. If this is the only bummer you're going to have out of it, we didn't get to talk about Iron Bar, his character from Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. Dude, I wanted to ask him how he got the gig, if he had an audition. Were there other people, tatted up, bald, short dudes that are
auditioned,
whose names is Angry? I mean, how many Angries are there in the world? There's one, my friend.
Yeah. I had that on my list of notes. I was going to get to that, but as you'll find out when you talk to Angry, the stories just start unraveling and they go on, and they're so amazing that you don't want to switch gears. And it was just inevitable that we wouldn't cover everything. So
it's also this thing where, and people will notice that he'll get caught on a memory and he'll want to take a left. And he's trying not to, because there's so many things going on that he wants to tell you about. And another great storyteller, and he does wrap it up and come back around. But and that's usually our cue to like jump in and like say something, just as how this podcast crap goes. But I'm telling you, it was just such a joy to just hang out with the guy. And that's all we did, is just hang out with Angry Anderson from Rose Tattoo here on the Talk Louder podcast.
Angry, thank you for joining us. What an honor.
Thanks. That's entirely the most appropriate thing you could have said all day. Thank you very much. Thank you.
What time is it in Australia? Is it you having breakfast right now?
No, it was a few hours ago. It's 10:15 a.m. in the morning.
Okay.
But I've only to explain why it was a bit of a panic at the end, because two things. This whole fucking technology thing is just. It's a mysterious realm for me. And,
tell us about it. Oh my God!
And this is someone who years and years and years ago, long before they made the movie, which they did in the 70s, you know, when we were all doing acid and stuff. And I was reading Lord of the Rings, and a girlfriend, she sort of an itinerant that sort of drifted through my house for a few months and on her way to somewhere. Anyway, she left me with The Hobbit.
Oh.
And she said, you know, Lord of the Rings. Anyway, strangely, talking about feeling uncomfortable in this world, I felt while I was reading the books, that incredibly fantasy world, I felt, I suppose, spiritually or soulfully, very comfortable in that world. And because when I was younger, I read a lot of books about fantasy stuff, you know, like a Conan, a guy, you know, books like Moorcock and those kind of writers. And Conan, of course, the most famous of all those series. But there was other books too. There was a couple of books written about this Irish, I suppose, you know, King Arthur type of figure called Bran MacMorn. And there was another couple of books with a character called Elric the Stormbringer. And he was an albino and had a magic sword that what gave him his power was every time he killed a bad guy, as the sword was slicing off its head or whatever, it drank its soul, and that empowered him. Anyway, long story short, here I am telling you I felt comfortable in Tolkien's world, and I feel very uncomfortable with fucking technology. So that's how fucked up I am.
Well, that makes three of us.
Yeah. I was trying to.
I don't even know if this mic is on, so you know, what do I know?
No, it's working a treat.
When
out of sync.
That's okay.
I was going to ask you guys some technical questions, and now I think maybe I'll go ahead and ask them anyway. But,
ask them anyway.
But you've already acknowledged that you're just as uncomfortable with this whole fucking thing that I am.
From one dinosaur to another, ask away.
Another, yeah. But I'm a little bit further down the track than you are.
That's okay.
You know, I just know this is tell you how fucking well, I haven't just noticed it, but you know, when you're looking at face fart and things are reversed.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, things are reversed, and some of I've noticed it in my daughter reckons it's because, you know, my phone's about 6 or 7 years old, because, you know, I was brought up in an era where if it wasn't broke, you don't throw it away.
Right.
You know, like that. So I don't prescribe to that whole Apple scam. No. There's a new fucking model every year.
No,
right.
And you know, because anyway, that's just my point of view. But I noticed that you know, a lot of things, if not everything, is in reverse.
Yes.
So, you know, a right-handed thing becomes a left-handed thing. Blah blah blah.
Right.
Sure. But a lot of the audio these days, they sound like chipmunks.
Yeah.
Because you know, I was watching this thing the other night. Not The Sopranos. It was something else, like that kind of, you know, an excerpt from a movie or a series, and they were like chipmunks. So the audio was sped up.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know why that happens, and I don't know how to fix it. It's fucking annoying. You know, it really, really pisses me off. Anyway, that's not what you called, is it?
No, but it's a hell of an intro.
Great. Yeah, we got a few laughs.
Hell of an intro there.
Yeah.
I'll go first.
Okay.
First off, I'm a really big fan
Oh, thank you. It's okay. You'll grow out of it.
Well, maybe not. Maybe not. I'm almost 60. In high school, I instead of
Just a pup.
learning important things, I was reading
I.e.
rock magazines. I had rock.
No, going back to important things. I.e. like example, please.
rock and roll.
No, but you were supposed to be learning important things.
History,
English, science, history.
Oh,
yeah,
right.
history.
Yeah,
I was in school.
Which version?
Right. Apparently the winner's version.
I was not paying.
Isn't that how it's written?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I
And,
was. Go ahead. I had rock magazines inside, leafing inside my history
inside
books.
your penthouse.
No, other way
It was
around.
Playboy in those days. Pre-penthouse.
Dave, I didn't know that he was going to be a jokester like this. But I was reading.
My daughter, she found this thing on FacePass. And it said, husband says to his wife, "So why did you marry me, sweetheart?" And she said, "'Cause you're funny." He says, "I thought it was because I was great in bed." She said, "See, you're hilarious."
That's a good one. Anyway,
that's my favorite joke at the moment. It's
that's
my
really
favorite
good.
joke.
Good. Anyway, I was learning about rose tattoo about 1980. Okay.
How old were you then?
Oh shit.
I'm no good at maths either.
17. No.
Yeah, so that's called child abuse in Australia. People go to jail for that kind of thing in this country.
For learning about rose tattoo? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, at such a tender young age. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So if you were caught carrying a stack of rose tattoo records down the street, you could go to jail for that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and I started buying your records early, and have been a fan a long time. I've got the Cobras and Flowers logo on my arm tattooed, along with
Show me.
many of our friends. Yeah, it's right there in the medallion. It's
fantastic.
It's old, but so
love
am I.
it.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's just
of
honest.
course.
That's fantastic.
But I would think that you've seen thousands of that.
Possibly hundreds.
Okay. All right.
Once we started touring again, because in the early '80s when we toured, everyone had steam-driven phones in those days, and there wasn't the technology that so you couldn't take photographs, right? There was this sort of like bulky apparatus, and it was called a camera.
Yeah.
And strange name, but anyway, since then I've been photographing. Particularly like obviously in Europe, because we haven't been back to the United States of America since '83, and that's in that planning is in the works for us to come back and do a farewell, because I'm going to wind the band up in the next couple of years. If I make
planned.
It through.
It was planned, but COVID killed it.
Yeah. Well, it was, yes, COVID did. The plague responsible for a lot of that sort of, the tragic events. But the other thing too about it, of course, is since then, and I'm not sure when this came about, because I've got some friends in America who, like I was talking on email to a guitar player in Guns N' Roses now, Richard Fortas, and of course Slash as well. And we were just chatting. This is going back like 6 months or 8 months, and I said, yeah, okay, we're planning on coming to America, and they were sort of, pretty excited about that. And one of the things that I alluded to that was in our way was the cost of visas, and of course we didn't think that we were going to get, and we still don't know whether we'll get DeMarco, the drummer, who's back in the band after 6 years in jail. We still don't know whether he'll get a visa to enter the country. We're doing the Monsters of Rock thing next year, and he's got.
I am on that with you.
Sweet. Well,
Yeah.
we'll be able to drink beer together.
Yes.
And chase loose women.
Rock and roll style.
Having just turned 75, I still can chase women. I just don't remember why. It's coming back. It's kind of like riding a bicycle, you sort of. I caught one the other day and I thought, oh, this feels good, like I like all these lumpy bits. Anyway, she was much younger than I, and that's another story. But so we're doing the Monsters of Rock now. He got a visa. We get there. I think we fly straight into Orlando. I'm not sure. And then we spend a night in a hotel. And because that's kind of like, isn't it curious the way they figure this whole visa situation out? Because we're going from the airport into a hotel, and then we go from there, we're picked up by a shuttle, and we're driven to the ship, and we get on the ship. He got a visa very easily to do that. But when we inquired as to, okay, what about touring and being on the ground, so to speak, in multiplicity, in other words, maybe 6 or 8 different states, they said, well, that's a different visa altogether. So we still don't know whether DeMarco can get in, but the costs involved have really nobbled us. They've just made it to the point where it's, unless we can come up with a way of maybe getting a grant, for like an art thing or whatever. That's going to sort of stand in our way as well. But we're very keen to come back to America because it's a very special thing when you think about it. We were only there over 1 year touring.
Are you talking about 1983?
Aerosmith.
Yeah.
Aerosmith.
The top. So, we were in very prestigious company.
Yeah.
So that went a long way, I think, to helping establish the band. But having toured with both of those bands since, particularly here, and they assure us that, the sort of the cult following that we have, they're aware of it because, they live there and, they pass information around, bands and, so they said, no, Rose Tattoo, we've always had a very, very strong and loyal, steadfast following because they've waited all this time. And so there's no way I want to let that sort of loyalty, down or not appreciate it for it. So even if it's costs us an arm and a leg to come back just that one more time to say thank you, and also sayonara.
Sure,
we're signing off. We will definitely do that. But with Scotty Crawford, who's our new manager, and he's been managing us for a few years now. And he's largely responsible for resurrecting the band back onto, the international circuit, so to speak. I got him as a manager earlier on. I wanted to form my own band, which is more of a sort of based on Rod Stewart and the Faces era.
Yeah.
And, white guys singing sort of like Tamla Motown, like just the way Roddy did. And that's always been a dream, because my favorite rock and roll band of all time is Roddy Stewart and the Faces.
Yeah, we love that stuff.
Oh, just extraordinary music. I love the Stones, and I love Zeppelin, and I love all those classic rock and roll or rock bands.
Yeah.
Not all rock or rock and roll is rock and roll. It has to swing, as you know. I mean, the people who established rock and roll, the Eddie Cochrans and the Gene Vincents and Little Richard and Jerry Lee. Unless it shuffles, unless it swings, it's not rock and roll. It might be rock.
It's got to have the roll.
That's right.
Oh yeah. Well, it's funny, like sometimes when, like you're playing a small club and there's like, maybe only 600 or 800 people there, you can establish a level of intimacy. Which doesn't happen in the bigger clubs or indeed in the festivals. Right. Besides, in festivals, no one wants to be bored to death with information. But I explain often that rock and roll is a sexual term. It's about the rocking and the rolling, which is a way of disguising fucking. And
it's true.
And that's the basis of the blues language, if you like. Where they had to tidy stuff up for people, anyway, it has to have, most definitely, it has to have the, and that's the great thing, talking about the Stones and to the great rock and roll bands, is that they've got that swagger, they've got the swing.
Yeah.
Well, that's what the Tats have for sure, and the just the whole pub rock, and you guys have boogie. It's like if the Stones and Motorhead and Little Richard had a little baby and turned it on 10 and went on tour. And I like the idea that you are loyal to the loyal, and that you want to keep this thing going and have a chance to shake hands and shake babies too,
Yeah.
I have a few things I'd like to hold up to the camera. This is great.
Whoa!
This is great. I have a little story. There was
where did you get that?
I'm going to tell you a story.
Okay.
Real quick. I'll try to make it quick.
You take all the time you like.
It was like 95 or 96. I had just gotten my first computer, and I'd got online, and I started chatting with this gentleman in Australia. He might have been in Sydney. And we started talking about, of course, the obvious rock and roll. He was a fan of mine, and I started asking him about Aussie bands, and of course ended up just like expressing much love for Rose Tattoo. And he goes, "Oh yeah, I'm in touch with Angry." I'm like, "What?" So at the time, I believe you were at a Current Affair.
Wow!
In the mid-90s?
In the 80s, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, he said that he had contacted you through a Current Affair, and I thought that he had given the address he had given me was at a Current Affair. It wasn't at your house or anything. It wasn't a home address. And I wrote you a letter. The gentleman's name, if I recall, was Cameron Appleby. And like I said, I believe he was in Sydney. And you had this book out that I don't even recall at that moment. I knew it was out, but I realized it was fairly new at the time, maybe a year old. And he gave me the address to just go, hey, yeah, just write him a letter, man. He's super nice and chill. And I was like, really? And so I wrote you a handwritten letter. And you did not write me back. Instead, you autographed and signed to Jason, rock on, best wishes, angry. And this is what I got instead of a return letter. And I appreciate that very much.
Not at all.
This was a long time ago. The story's not even done yet. The book that I spake of, I lent it out to a friend of mine because, oh, you've got to read Angry's book. It's so good. It's his whole life in your hand. And I don't have as many brain cells as I used to.
No, none of us do.
I forgot who I lent it to, and I couldn't figure it out, and I widespread tried to find out who I lent the book to, and I never got it back. And I'm so attached. I went on eBay and spent too much money for this off eBay, and it was like the only one that was available out there. And it's pretty cool because whoever owned this book has like yellowed out some quotes, you know, there's like some of it's like yellowed, right?
Wow.
Highlighted parts,
okay.
their favorite bits, right? Anyway, this is great. Cameron Appleby also sent me this.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
It's like True Value Hardware ads from the newspaper, and like every leaflet you turn on has you going, you know, holding up pliers and tools and shit.
Yeah.
Fucking great.
The things you do for a buck.
Right. But let's talk about. I want to get to nitty. Anyway, thank you, Cameron Appleby. Thank you, Angry, for just
Thank you, Cameron. Yeah.
generous with your talents and your parts of your life to share with fans.
I'm working on a sequel.
Excellent. You got into helping young people at some point.
That's how I ended up on television, actually.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about that, please.
Do we have the time? I mean, I have the time if you do.
We'll try to make it, you know, just be weary of the clock, you know.
Right, yeah. No,
we're all racing the clock anyway, so just be weary.
It's kind of that's very deep. It's one of the you may have already realised this that that concept is lost on me when I'm talking to someone of interest.
I figured that out.
Yeah, thank you. You're very generous.
As you, sir.
The thing about it is I'll try to make this brief. When the Tats first formed, we used to live in a very dodgy area called Darlinghurst, which is akin to a red light area called King's Cross, and it was a lot of nightclubs, a lot of restaurants, a lot of criminal activity, et cetera, et cetera. And anyway, long story short, I met a guy whose nickname was Sluggo, and he was a big formidable weapon that used to work the doors at two of the clubs. And he loved the Tats, and as a lot of those hard guys,
I believe he's mentioned in the book too, Sluggo.
Well, yeah, bingo. So that's the story. I was visiting him, and he said, when I get out of jail, I want to start a halfway house as a step towards rehabilitation for young offenders. And Rose Tattoo, as you know, is a band lyrically and stance wise from a male point of view, which was terribly unfashionable then. I mean, imagine how unfashionable it would be today. We wouldn't get off the ground. But yeah, because I remember Bob Dylan saying he was reiterating something that Woody Guthrie had already said, because, as you know, he was a devotee of Woody Guthrie, and he said, if you write about your life, if you write about what you see, what you feel, in other words, if you write about real stuff, the songs have a soul, if you like, and that's my insert into what I think Woody Guthrie via Bob Dylan meant. He said, if you write about real things and real people, there's a good chance your songs last forever. Now, here we are all these years later listening to Woody Guthrie and, of course, Bob Dylan, because he's not yet passed on. And I think one of my favourite sayings is a Woody Guthrie quote. You know how in modern days, people say it like, hey, take it easy, man. Well, see, that comes from a Woody Guthrie quote. Woody Guthrie's quote was, take it easy, but take it. Yeah, really, eh, Dave? That's fucking cool, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, it's right up there with, Marlon Brando's line, hey, Johnny, what do you rebel against? And he says, well, what do you got? From Wild One. And but anyway, getting back to so I've tried to always write songs that a part of my life, or like I'm writing about my life. The title track was from Scarred for Life is, that's autobiographical, and so I still think that rings true in every sense, and it still does today. And I think, and I'm not saying, because it's not my place to judge other people's music, but I think there's a lot of music that is produced that isn't about personal experience, or it isn't about soulful, heartfelt observations of your environment, whether it be political. I don't think music should get all that political, but Woody Guthrie was quite political, was Bob Dylan, or is Bob Dylan.
Well, you were helping.
Really sure.
You were helping kids with cancer.
The thing was that my songs or my lyrics resonated with, going back to Sluggo, with a lot of young males in jail.
Okay.
It had a similar, when they listened to Rose Tattoo songs, even to this day, like, I said, that's me, that's my life, and I said, well, that's the reason that we resonate with one another is because we had similar lives or lead similar lives. In the physicality, in other words, what happens. I mean, not everybody survives pedophilia, but there's a lot of us that have or do. Not everybody has to deal with depression, but there's a lot of us that do and have and do and will for the rest of their lives. So, those things in the book, getting back to that, the reason I'm doing now another version is that I'm writing a part of the book. Well, I've almost finished it, where I examine all the lyrics that I've ever written and the backstories, the thing that promoted those lyrics. They're on the other page, but the book finishes off where I'm happily married, and of course that didn't survive. But there's a lot of the detail about my childhood and my growth through music that I think I need to be able to express that and get it out, because it's a soul cleaning thing and it's a soul healing thing. So what led me to television was two things. One was Sluggo, but we just finished, the tour of the band came back here and unfortunately broke up. We decided to, as we did from time to time, spend some time apart, because it was a very volatile band and always was, except for recent days. But there was a volatility within the characters that allowed us to be together for short, intense periods of time. And whenever that happened, there was an album produced. And But because of the volatility of the characters involved, the intensity of what it was, kind of like you pressure cooked something for so long, and then after a while the lid blew off, and then sometime later you had to start again. So that's what we always did. And so we came back from America and broke up, and I just met my daughter, who was a couple of weeks old by the time I first met her, the eldest of my children. And I realised then, that I was in a mess. I mean, I was drug addicted, I was alcohol dependent, and I was in a pretty fucked up state of mind. Not that I realised it then, because I was living the rock and roll lifestyle, so couldn't have been happier, And then the band broke up, and I was kind of left. It was one door opens and another door closes, and that's the classic sort of philosophic view. And I realised, because when I met my daughter, I realised I can't continue to be a responsible father, to be a father. I couldn't continue doing what I loved the most, which was rock and roll wrapped up in self-destruction, but, burn bright and leave a good-looking corpse. I knew I couldn't do that, because he was this perfect human being with no protection, apart from her mother and father. And so I realised that as life does, it takes when not when it needs, when you need. But you don't always know that. We're not imbued with that sort of depth of intelligence. It's something we learn gradually as we get older through experience. And pain's the greatest teacher. And so I realised that I was destroyed in one sense and resurrected immediately in the other, because even though I was losing the great passion, the great love, the motivation, my purpose for getting up in the morning, well, in the afternoon, was rock and roll. And all of a sudden I knew that had to change, because I knew I had this duty, this honour. I was honour bound to this new creation, this person, this new human being, and she deserved, and I never did have. So I knew that she deserved to have the best chance, the best mother, the best father that she could possibly have. So, yeah, that's what changed it. So around about that time, and I was floundering because I could work with my own band at weekends, but, there was no more Rose Tattoo. There was no more lifestyle per se. Because with the Tats, particularly back in those early days, it was 24 hours a day, like most of those rock and roll bands of that era that built greatness out of their, absurdity.
Right.
They were so, the Stones, later on Guns N' Roses, but the Skid Rows and the Motleys, and they were the sort of the third wave, because the first wave of real delinquents was, as we talked about before, was Eddie Cochran, Gene Vincent, Jerry Lee Lewis, Elvis. Those days, that was the first wave. And then there was that homogenizing period, which is integrally important, but it was like, well, really, where it all became coochie pie and formulated, and there was lots of pop hits, and not that I deride pop, but then all of a sudden there was, I think the next revolution was, the British
invasion.
I thought it was curious. There's a headline that came out of America, the British invasion, which I thought was a clever play on history, if you like, but also it encapsulated the impact that the Beatles particularly, and then they opened the floodgates and the rest of it poured in, and because there must have been like that culturally. because like I said, there was a lot of bands around and artists in those days that were, for now you look at the Beatles in the sort of early to mid 60s, and you think, it's very cool. It was a very cool look, but it would have been just as uncool as when the Tats first toured America, because we got things thrown at us. We got booed. There was
yeah.
I remember Steven Tyler said to me after the first time it happened. I said, "Fuck, like what's going on?" And he said, "Fuck them. Just tell them to get fucked." I'm not too sure whether he meant me to do that literally, but I took him literally. So the next time we went out on stage and I went boo boo, I said, fuck off, get fucked. And the audience sort of, oh, what the fuck was that? Yeah. Anyway,
well,
that's how I got. That's a long-winded explanation of how I got into television, isn't it? Because I was working in this seedy area, the King's Cross, with Sluggo, who'd now got out of jail. He was working with street kids to try and young males.
I see. To
push them, get them jobs, and push them in a more positive direction. And 60 Minutes crew came down to do an expose on street kids and all the problem that they were and all the crime that they were responsible for and committing. And they came down and they heard, I don't know how, but they heard that Angry Anderson, who was at that stage the number one bad boy of Australian rock and roll, described as the single greatest threat to the stability of Australian youth by a well-known journalist. Here he was. So they thought that I was exploiting. I heard later that they talked about exposing me because they thought I was down there dealing drugs or something.
Oh.
Whereas I was working with Sluggo in a halfway house. I mean, I wasn't there all the time, but I was there like every 2 or 3 weeks, and we would sit around with a new, like a bunch of young, and he was taking kids out of juvie as well, predominantly out of juvie because, he thought, well, the younger you get them. Anyway, they heard about me and they came down, and because the kids trusted Sluggo and myself, they were able to get access to the footage, which they never used because it exposed the complicity of crooked cops and exploitation of pre-teens and early teens, boys and girls, to prostitution. The ugly side of reality, in other words, the truth, which of course we all understand. Mainstream media doesn't deal in the truth. Now, very, very seldom has in the history of propaganda, but certainly not these days. But so the producers on this television show, which was in those days from '85, that's when I first started. It was a show called Midday Show, and it was what they used to call the Blue Ridge set. The late middle-aged ladies that were at home and watched television while they had lunch. And so it was all sort of cutesy pie sort of content. And, cooking, someone would come on and show how to bake scones and, what I mean? Like that kind of stuff. And then Raymar, who was from 60 Minutes, he was offered to take over the chair. And he said, if I can breathe fresh life into Midday Show and make it more of like an American-style magazine show. So they wanted colourful people. They wanted people that had a different point of view than their historic, because they were losing their audience. And he'd seen the footage. And he said, I'm intrigued. And so, I was called to a meeting. I met them. We talked about the real issues. And he said, you know what, Australian public need to know what really is going on.
And this is Ray Martin, to be exact. Okay.
Yeah. And I said, and you know, very gutsy move on Ray's part.
Yeah.
To take that chance and to have that leap of faith, and not only myself, but there was a couple of other presenters that he brought in that were unknown. And my brief was youth and all matters pertaining to. We talked about teenage suicide. We talked about, which in the mid 80s was unheard of. People didn't believe that teenagers were committing suicide in high school age, you know, like in other words, in the early teens to mid to late teens. And
yeah, because it's so fucking easy to be a teenager, isn't it?
Yeah. So gratefully, I'm just out of that phase now. Although I still get acne, so.
Well, that's good. You're making me feel better because you're so good looking, you know.
Yeah, it's well. Unfortunately, what happens is that when you're shaving, that's when you discover you've got a new pimple, you know. And because I shave with a straight razor.
Still.
Yeah.
Wow.
You know, with a handheld blade thing, you know. And so if it's back here, you don't actually just shears it off to the bone and you go, oh, the fuck, you know, like, and then there's piss and blood everywhere, and you know what I mean? It's like, anyway, sorry, we digress.
It's all right.
You mentioned your friend Sluggo, and I know you've probably answered this question 100 times, but I want to hear it from the man himself. Speaking of nicknames, how did you become Angry Anderson? How did you get the nickname Angry?
The original nickname was the Angry Ant, because there's a very unfortunate joke about an ant and an elephant, but that's another story altogether. If you don't know the joke, I'll tell you later. But yeah, there was a friend of mine. I was still living in Melbourne. It was when I was singing with Buster Brown.
Right.
And there was a dealer in exotic substances, a legendary guy around Melbourne called Mangy Mick Maluzak. And he passed himself off as a Russian gypsy. Anyway, Maluzak, I'm not too sure. He's got it all.
Yeah.
There's the bus. Probably the second worst cover in the history of Australian rock and roll.
Well, the back photo, Angry, is fantastic.
Yeah, that's classic, isn't it?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Phil's jeans are spectacular.
The thing about Rudd is because his surname is Rudd Savages, right? So he's of a European ethnic persuasion. We when we were younger, we used to call them wogs, but so the fashion in those days was like 16, 18 or 20-inch flared bottoms.
Wow, that's big.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But so when he went to the tailor, the tailor said, "Well, you want 20s?" And he went, "No, I want 22s." Because he wanted to be. Rudd's always been like that. He wants to be cooler than cool, you know, like so. Yeah,
well,
yeah.
He changed the world of drumming. I mean, guy's a clock. He's a clock.
Yeah, I think that's the thing about him. The beauty of his playing is its simplicity.
Oh yeah. See, I don't think,
and he's a clock. Yeah, he keeps great time.
Amazing.
A lot of people, especially in America, may not even realize that prior to Rose Tattoo, you sang for this band Buster Brown, and Phil Rudd was the drummer. We all kind of became familiar with Phil Rudd through AC/DC in America. Yeah, but so you do have that history with him. But back to your nickname, Angry. So how did you get that?
So anyway, there was we used to drink at this pub called the Station Hotel, which was opposite a train station in a inner Melbourne suburb called Paran. And so because it was an inner suburb, there was a lot of small what we call colonial. It's from the colonial post-colonial days, but like terrace housing. So there was lines built on the English model. There was lines and lines of houses exactly the same, and they're joint, right? So it's a low-income established place. So there was this pub frequented by. It was a muso's pub, particularly at weekends, but even during the week, you could go down there at lunchtime on a Tuesday, and there'd always been all these, this ne'er-do-well musos hanging around in the bar, right? So
perfect.
Actually, it was the first time I actually saw AC/DC play was at the Station Hotel. But anyway, Mangy Mick was, like I said, a dealer in exotic substances, and there was some sort of situation where he was owed money, and he told some money collectors that he knew, and they went and collected the money, and there was physical violence. Anyway, some weeks later, these people turned up at the pub, and there was altercation in the street. There was about 30 people involved. And anyway, we all go back into the pub after they'd left, and we're all bloodied and battered. And Mangy made the comment. He said, "Hey, what about?" In those days, my nickname was Mouse. And I said, "What?" Mick just came out with this classic line. He said, "What about the angry ant?" And there I'm standing there with the fucking fat lip and dry blood on my nose, and and he said, and because it equates to anyway, there was a big fat bloke, and he was drunk as a lord. So I jumped on his back, and he's hit the ground and knocked himself out, and everyone thought I was responsible for knocking him out. So the ant and the elephant. Anyway, what about the angry ant? And I got a round of applause, and since then it was the angry ant. And, hey, angry ant, and then after a couple of weeks, which is the Australian way, they abbreviate everything.
Yeah.
Like my nickname at school was Ando, because my surname's Anderson.
Right.
So, so after a while, it just dropped back to angry. And I think the basis of it was that I remember saying to Mange, because he and I used to share flats or apartments or houses back in the day with the other band members, etc. And a bunch of ne'er-do-wells, you know what I mean? And I said to him, everyone's starting to call me angry. It's so fucking cool. And he goes, man, he said, and he just, because he was a big solid man, and all my best friends are big solid men, by the way. It's
by default.
It's a survival device.
Sure. I get it. I need some bigger friends myself.
Yeah. All my best mates are all fucking big cunts. Anyway, he said, mate, he said, you're like an angry little rat. He said, you're disproportionately angry for your size, but that was the result of, let's not get, too deep and morbid about it, but that was a product, it's actually in the book, of my upbringing. My father was little, he was a jockey, my biological father.
Okay.
And one of the first things he taught me when I was a kid was how to fight, how to box. He was a Golden Gloves, what they call a Golden Gloves boxer. But and he was a violent man. He was violent to everybody, physically violent, but he was emotionally violent and physically violent to my mother and I. And he was. So it was funny how things, and when I do public speaking now, particularly with young people, well, not particularly, but I think particularly with young people, and I emphasise, I tell my story because it's what I'm qualified to do, but I emphasise how life is such a poetic experience. It's such a profoundly poetic experience, in so much as my spiritual beliefs are, and I discovered these, or I was taught these, learned these, and it's the way I live my life. Nothing happens randomly. Everything happens for a purpose. And how was I to know when I was, in my, I was 8, 9, 10, and 12 and 13, and I was being physically and emotionally brutalised by my biological father, that later in life that would serve me. So what it illustrates in a spiritual sense is that there's nothing that's wasted, no experience. Even something that's the most horrible thing to imagine, like losing a child, I've yet not come to terms with that, but I will at some stage. But I have to believe that, even if it just makes us, his sister and his 2 brothers and myself as a family unit, if it just makes us stronger, or I don't know, wiser, I don't know I don't know, because like I said, I haven't yet fully processed that. But in my experience in my life, which like I tell my children, this has always worked in my life. I said, if I hadn't have been a victim of a pedophile, it would not have led to other, it was an awful moment in my life, but the same person who did that, who was the same person who introduced me to music. So
Right.
there's the yin and yang of life. There's proof in itself,
well, I feel like it comes out in your lyrics, and people need to realize that your music is part of your soul and part of a way for you to heal and learn from yourself as you're writing these lyrics, and it's kind of electrifying all the lessons we got to learn, all the bridges we got to burn. That is huge and bigger now, talking to you. And of course, if people were to know the lyrics to your songs, well, fuck it. If they didn't even know the lyrics to your songs and what you stand for, and then they read the book, they would get the fucking message either way. So, it's important for you to be taking care of yourself in the way that you know how from your experiences.
I think too that, listening to Angry tell his story, I think it takes a special quality in a person to be able to seek out and find the positive aspect or the strength in a situation that would squash a lot of other people. It takes a lot of guts and a lot of vision to be able to find the good in something that on the surface would be very negative to a lot of people. So I think that's a very special quality that you have. You've obviously had a lot of experiences in your life that you've grown from and you've learned from, and finding the positive in those things is pretty remarkable. So good on you.
Yeah.
Good on you, man.
A story, Dave, it sort of it brings it back sharply into focus, of course, because yesterday was Father's Day. And, obviously my children and I were all together. My now youngest son still lives with me, but as did Liam until he was killed. And one of the things, I'll tell you a story, and I do tell this story when I do public speaking, is that when Colin was teaching me to box, and I illustrate the story or the meaning that I'm about to allude to, was that, he started me off at a very young age, around about 8 or 9 years old. And we would be in the backyard and we'd be, sparring. And, I'd because he was a boxer per se, as a jockey, he trained to keep his weight down, but he needed that upper body strength. Anyway, and I remember him vividly. It's a story I tell because I remember it vividly. But he would knock me down, and he would stand over me, and like a lot of hard, belligerent people, he was harsh even in his better moments, so to speak. So here he was trying to teach me how to fight because he was so belligerent about being a small guy. As he always used to say, you're always got to be small. You're a small man in a big man's world. You've got to learn to, hold your own.
Right.
So he used the two things that his father, who was a worse male, a worse father, fear and aggression, or fear and anger. And I remember laying there on the ground, and I can hear his voice like it was yesterday, and he would say, "Get up." And he would stand over me, and he wouldn't offer to help. He'd say, "Get up." And he would say things like to me too, "You're an Anderson. You get up and you hold your head up. You get up." And he would be belligerent. And I knew once I got back onto my feet and held my hands up again, he would, because every time I went to throw a punch like a boxer would, he knew where to duck, but he knew how to counterpunch. So, and that's the art of learning how to box, right? Is you learn how to read that physicality part. So there he would knock me down again, and again I would hear him say, "Get up." Now, he was in a belligerent and I believe ignorant way trying to teach me how to fare physically in a violent world, because violence is often visited on the weak, and being small is a vulnerability. But later on in life, I don't think Colin had the capacity, and maybe I'm selling him short, but I don't think he had the capacity to realise that what he was teaching me in that roundabout way was one of the most valuable lessons that a father can teach a son, or a daughter, and that is that life will continually knock you down just to see if you can get up. I mean, it's not just, but the purpose of being knocked down is to rise again. To survive the experience, to have the experience, to benefit from the experience, which is what I believe we're all put here to do. You have to be knocked down so that you can learn to get up.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I love your perspective.
That's great.
It's not easy. A lot of people would stay down and feel sorry for themselves and think they couldn't get back up. And it takes emotional and physical and spiritual strength to stand up and face it again. So I love that perspective that you have. I want to jump ahead to when is the first time that you were aware that this band called Guns N' Roses was covering Nice Boys? And what was your initial impression? And, because in America, you weren't very well known. Rose Tattoo wasn't. I remember I grew up in San Antonio, Texas, and we had a DJ on the radio named Joe Anthony who used to play Rose Tattoo. And I remember when you were touring with Aerosmith, they were on the Rockin' a Hard Place tour, and you were coming through San Antonio, and I wanted so badly to go to that show because I loved Aerosmith, and I loved what I heard about Rose Tattoo because of this local DJ. I was too young. My parents wouldn't let me go to the concert, so I never did get to see you. But really, a lot of America wasn't really aware of you until Guns N' Roses came about. So when were you first aware of Guns N' Roses playing Nice Boys, and what was your impression of that?
I'm not sure, but I have an inkling. I was living in Los Angeles. I lived there for the best part of a year, writing with a local, an English bloke who'd settled in California, in Los Angeles, a guy called Michael Slamer, and he was from an English pop band. Anyway, classic romantic story. He met a local, they got married, he stayed there. And this was 1989. And wow. The then record company, I'd done, this is going back to the two worst rock and roll album covers. The first one was an album that we did called Southern Stars, which was our last Albert's album.
I think Jason.
Then there was a year or two off, and I got signed to Mushroom. Yeah. Oh my God.
He's got it.
I don't think it's the worst. I don't think it's the worst.
Yeah. Show me the worst one then.
Maybe
anyway,
I don't have the. Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Actually, the worst I've seen, and I've got it somewhere on my phone. There was a thing done on FaceFast about, the 20 worst covers of all time, and there's this is, I think they're a Mormon family, or they're but mum and dad and about 4 kids, and they're all dressed exactly the same, really badly.
Yeah.
And they're singing gospel songs, or songs of praise. Sorry, not gospel songs, songs of praise. That's the worst cover I've ever seen. But yeah. So what was I talking about? That yeah, the first album. I went to Mushroom Records and produced the first album, Beats from a Single Drum, and which was confusing for the fans because it was my first solo album, but it was produced, it was released as a Rose Tattoo album for a marketing. This is, I mean, right. We all know how dishonest record companies can be.
Yeah.
To
be clear, it was not Rose Tattoo, and it was obviously not Rose Tattoo, right?
Absolutely. I mean. Right. I remember when we were talking about the first single, and we had a listening party, and one of the DJs said, "I love that song, Calling," and of course the Mushroom people were there, and they said, "Yes, I love it. That's radio friendly, and we'll play that." And I watched it. This is before it was released. This is just when it was done a desk mix, and the album had yet to come out. Mm-hmm. And he said, "What's the song about?" And I said, "Well, I watched this Jacques Cousteau documentary about Wales, the language of Wales, which is singing." Mm-hmm. And they cocked their heads in interest, the way dogs do. Yeah. And what do you mean? I said, "Well, what do you mean? What do I mean?" I said, "It's a song about," and then I went on to explain how whale pods sing to one another around, and because water is the great resonator, they can be hundreds and hundreds of kilometers apart, but they can sing, and they use tones and notes that carry through, so it travels, right? They don't even have to know one another.
Yeah, they're communicating. I wonder why those fuckers didn't understand that you wrote a song about communication.
Well, bingo. So you took acid too.
Actually, no, but
really?
All my friends did. So yeah,
wonderful experience awaits you.
Conduit.
Basically, Mushroom just didn't get it. They just thought, they go, "Wait, an Angry Anderson singing about whales."
And these were songs that you wrote with the English gentleman.
No. Oh, sorry. Now, skip ahead.
Okay.
So after that fiasco of releasing that album, I walked away. I said, "Fuck you. You got no idea what's going on musically. All you know about is like formulaized, stuff." Because Anyway, so there was a couple of years off, and then they wanted me to join this program where they were sending people to Los Angeles to work with American writers and producers. And I think there was there was 2 or 3 other bands and a solo artist on the Mushroom label. We were all in Los Angeles at the same time, which is 1989. And so Michael Slamer and I wrote that album.
Okay.
Blood from Stone.
Right.
And I remember when we first got there, we took a house. Well, my manager took a house in the Hollywood Hills. Or if you stood on our balcony and looked across to the left, you saw Griffith Observatory, and the sign was up behind us up there.
Yeah.
Franklin was down there, Sunset, whatever. So we were up in the hills, in the canyons. That's right, the canyons. Yeah. And anyway, as it turns out, one of the guys that had a room in this house was Axel's brother.
Oh.
And he was like a PA roadie. He studied law, he told me. But anyway, long story short, he said, my brother's band, they're fucking huge fans of your band, your old band, Rose Tattoo. They actually play some of your songs. And I went, oh, okay. And I said, well, if next time they're doing a show, we'll go, And as would have it, a couple of weeks later, they did a show. They did a show, and the opening band was a fantastic band called Burning Tree. Mm. And they were a trio.
Yeah. And
it destroyed me that they never got to be big band, but I don't know even what happened to them. But I got 2 of their albums, and great band. And then the next band on was Faith No More.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
I think it was Faith No More.
Do you remember the venue?
It was a hall somewhere.
Okay. And it was in 89?
Yeah, what was it? What was Faith No More's first song? It was kind of like a part sort of rappy, heavy rock.
Their first big breakthrough single was called Epic.
That's it.
Yeah.
Anyway, they were next on.
Yeah.
And they blew me away. I thought, fuck me, how good musically.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought the front man was as mad as a cut snake, which was good. That's good because he was so fucking.
Oh yeah.
The way he moved and all that kind of shit.
Mike Patton is a motherfucker of a front man.
Yeah.
He can sing. He can sing any fucking thing. He can sing.
And he did in their set. And I remember seeing them do an article or an interview later where they have, because just a visual thing, you think that they've sort of catered to each genre of music. But what they did quite cleverly in the article was they just drew this collection of different musical genres into a band and melded it and made it work. Anyway, I was fucking blown away. I thought they were fucking amazing. So we went outside to have a joint, and then we came back in, and then the act on, the last act on was Guns N' Roses.
Wow. And
then later on, of course, it was so funny because
did they play Nice Boys and pull you on stage or what?
No. This is a bit of the story, I suppose.
Okay.
I can't even actually remember in all truth if they actually played it, but they assured me that they would have.
Yeah.
And I would have been absolutely fucking thrilled about the fact that, an American band was, because I thought they were amazing. I thought they really had the look down. They had the swagger. And they got all the components of being a rogue rock and roll band.
If they went to the trouble to learn Rose Tattoo's material and put it in their set and release it and record it and release it, they had swagger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as you can imagine, over the years, once we became, they came out here and they wanted us to do, we reformed.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. Wasn't the band like in ashes? You guys were scattered and not even.
We self-imploded yet again.
And that was in 91 or 90. When was that?
Yeah, it was very early 90s.
Okay.
Guns N' Roses was on the Use Your Illusion tour, so that was 92. So you're somewhere around the early 90s.
Real quick, I want to go back. I think that it later came out called Guns N' Roses Lies. But it was on the band's early label, Uzi Suicide. Yes. They released that Live Like a Suicide, and that had a whole lot of Rosie. It had Nice Boys. It had an Aerosmith cover.
Mama Kin.
Mama Kin, that's right. Thank you, Dave. And then it had a few Guns songs. Yeah, and I wore that fucking thing out, and I was so happy because that band was mine. I was like, they're talking my language. Oh my God. And that would have been in 87. So
it was sooner than 87 because
86
Appetite came out. Yeah. Appetite for Destruction. That's why I asked Angry.
Right.
So
right.
The first thing Guns N' Roses ever released was Live Like a Suicide, and that predates Appetite for Destruction, which came out in 87.
And it had a fucking Rose Tattoo song on it.
Live Like a Suicide had a Rose Tattoo song on it. And then when Appetite for Destruction blew up, they repackaged Live Like a Suicide and added some acoustic songs, and they put out this album or an EP called Lies, Lies, Lies.
Right.
And because they were the biggest band on the planet at that time, the whole world heard Rose Tattoo.
Yes.
A lot of people for the very first time because Guns N' Roses was huge. And that would have been 88, 89, about when Andrew was talking about. Yeah. So that's why I asked him, when was he first aware? Was he aware at the time of Live Like a Suicide, or was it more after the Appetite for Destruction phenomenon and then the Lies, Lies, Lies?
Well, it was in 89.
Okay, so that would have been...
Because, there was a lot of record company people there. And some of them knew who I was.
Sure.
But they were there for that show because, like when I say, it was a pretty prestigious lineup. It was it was a new concept to me, but it was a showcase.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
So,
okay. Yeah.
So both Faith No More and the Gunners, and I think even Burning Tree might have been just recently signed, or they'd be signed, and so it was just pre the whole thing exploding because there they were in this like a hall in the suburbs, like downtown. But it wasn't like a club.
Okay.
And they were, there must have been like, if 1,000 people, there would only be like 1,000 people, maybe even less, maybe 800. But
wow, that sounds like a private party or something.
Yeah, maybe it was
a little
too.
bit.
Yeah,
Table showcase.
Because there was a lot of record company people there.
Yeah.
But that was sort of, they were sort of just coming out, apart from, because there was a tiny little bit of a hint of the sort of the teased hair and but they weren't they were starting to wear they were wearing things like leather and like chaps, and I think it might have been Duff. I remember Duff says. Duff with the Reformation, it was so funny. He paid us the great compliment in Duff style, and this is going back a few years. And they were out here. We were doing the opening slot, and they said, "Look, come back and see us. Before the show. We just want to after sound check in the afternoon. We want to hang out a bit and talk shit and." Anyway, we were there, and there was a couple of people there, and so you guys go way back. Someone said that this is one of the American entourage, and Duff said, if I can quote him almost verbatim, he said, "Way back, we stole all their shit.
Yes.
Yeah. Hey, good on Duff for admitting it.
Yeah.
Fucking absolutely. But see, we've always enjoyed that relationship. Like, anyway, getting back to that showcase night,
Yeah.
I heard the story later from Axel's brother. He said, man, they were fucking bummed but freaked out. Like, anyway, someone must have said to them, like a lot of record company people. But anyway, getting back to we'd gone out in between Faith No More and Guns N' we'd had a joint, and, you know, like most people, I get the munchies like fucking fierce. And so we watched the set, and it was fantastic. It was really, really good. And I've said immediately after they finished, I said, fuck, let's go. I've got to have a beer and a pizza. So we left straight away. And there was about 4 or 5 of us. But his brother stayed.
Yeah.
Because, you know, he wanted to go and say hello to his brother. And so he must have gone backstage and said, I was here with blah, 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 and Angry Anderson from Rose Tattoo. And they've gone, fuck, what the? Was he out there? And they said, yeah. You know, his brother said, yeah. He said he was here, but he's gone. They went to get pizza. And then years later, they told me the story. They said, we were fucking chuffed that you were there. And they were sort of freaked out because, like, what did I think of them playing our shit, you know?
Yeah.
Right.
I have a little bit of a interjectory here. I give Guns N' Roses all of the credit for, you know, recording Nice Boys and in the mid 80s, to be safe, and it's sort of introducing a lot of people who didn't have Kerrang! Magazine in their history book in 1980 and reading about Rose Tattoo. So I got a record deal in 88, and I was in Los Angeles recording in the Valley at Sound City. And so every night we'd go out and see bands play, of course, because it's 5 guys from Texas who've never fucking been anywhere and never had any money. We're going to soak it all up and get crazy, right? Yeah. Dude, every fucking band covered a Rose Tattoo song. And some, you know, we'd see 3 bands, 4 bands in a row. Every one of them would play Rock and Roll Outlaw. All of them. And I was like, don't these guys call each other and say, oh fuck, we wore the same shirt? You know, they need to call each other and go, are you guys playing it tonight? Yeah, you guys can't play it, it's already on our set list, you know. But everywhere I'd go to a whole nother club the same night, someone would play Rock and Roll Outlaw. And I was like, fuck.
Well, that's tragic, isn't it?
Yeah, well, but it's all, you know what, man? It's also fucking awesome. It's also beautiful, too. It's beautiful.
It's the coolest thing.
In Junkyard, have you heard of a band called Junkyard?
No.
No, okay. Yeah. Okay, they cover your shit, too. They do Bad Boy for Love. They do One of the Boys. I know they've done Rock and Roll Outlaw. Oh yeah, and I went to high school with the singer, and they, you know, him and his buddies moved out to Hollywood and got a record deal, and around the same time that my shit happened, and we're all fans of your shit. So for me, like I said, getting out there and just everybody's all about Rose Tattoo. And how does it feel? I'll throw a question in here. How does it feel to hear these stories? And to know or just not know, I mean, there was a band called Princess Pang that played a Rose Tattoo song.
Oh, yeah.
You remember Princess Pang? Do you remember that? Female-fronted hard rock band. They were great. And they did, I think they did Rock and Roll Outlaw as well. But the point is how do you feel is like, you know, basically a decade plus after you, like, pen the songs, these guys are paying homage to you in America and loving you, and you were underground. It was kind of punk rock to be into Rose Tattoo. As a matter of fact, me and Dave know a lot of, like, our friends who were in punk rock bands who have your logo tattooed on their bodies forever.
Yeah.
And they're gonna flip the me and Dave are the coolest kids in town right now.
Right now. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's true. How does it feel? How does it feel to hear all this shit about stuff you wrote when you were just kind of like, I don't know if anyone's gonna like this shit or not, but here it goes, and you make some records with Vanda and Young, and I wanted to ask you how that was, because holy shit, how does it feel to know that American kids are covering your songs?
Several answers to several questions.
Yes,
how
sir.
does it make me feel? It makes me feel 75. It's
Yeah, yeah.
and but it's one of the greatest compliments. I mean,
Of course it is.
There's a saying about mimicry or whatever is the greatest compliment. I think it might have been even. I was just thinking, that's not the correct wording, but
imitation is the greatest form of flattery.
That's it.
Beautiful.
I think it's like this. It's like with the Gunners playing, because it's the same thing. The Gunners were playing early Rose Tattoo. See, they were looking for influences that spoke to them. That were, this is the way I read it. That meant something to them. So that I think you instinctively know that when you start getting into music and you're forming the idea of creating something of your own. All with the Rose Tats, even with Buster Brown, but even since after I just left tech school at 17 and wanted to get into a band, we played, well, in the first 2 or 3 bands I was in, we only played covers, which is somebody else's songs.
Yeah, but that's normal. That's okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
So I see that as a natural progression when, and even though it's very complimentary, and of course I think it's always been complimentary, is that I listened to a lot of music as a kid, and I chose certain songs. I chose 20 Flight Rock. I chose Good Golly Miss Molly. I chose like certain songs. That's Matchbox. Just stuff, blues classics mainly that were turned into rockabilly, that were turned into country, that were turned into blues again, that were turned into, when I say blues, I mean, the early Rolling Stones, Eric Burdon, Fleetwood Mac, the early Fleetwood Mac, one of the greatest blues bands ever. And, so when you're looking for an influence, and whether it's a subliminal thing, but we're driven by forces that we don't actually understand. Whether we ever do or not's irrelevant. But we're driven by forces that guide us through our lives, that know better, in other words. Like, you may want to do that, but I'm going to push you this way. That's the creational process, because that's where you need to go. And the wisdom of that is so profound. It's like you just might have something mapped out. I mean, I was ready to retire, 3 years ago. I was like, fucking had enough. And I thought, I'm going to buy a farm and, 20 acres, and I'm going to grow veggies and, go shooting and fishing and just basically, be a hermit. And because, everything that was going on, this is pre-plague, pre-New World Order, pre-reset, all that. I was sick of all the shit even before that, so you can imagine how angry I am now. But anyway, it's such a cliche thing to say, but you can't but feel humbled by the fact that you've written something, as you said, back in those days. And really, George and Harry did say, and they weren't about changing us too much. They just wanted us to be successful. And they said, right, you got to get rid of some of the violence out of the way that you are in front of an audience, and the violence in your music, and you just got to sort of basically ease people into it. But when we wrote that stuff, when you said, and quite rightfully, see, you've got an insight a lot of people don't, or most people don't have. It was in tune with what we were creating, which was, we were like musically in Australia at that time, we were outlaws. We were Ned Kelly. We were Jesse James. We were like we just didn't give a fuck. And if people didn't like songs like Assault and Battery because they thought it was promoting violence, well, fuck, that's what's real. That's what it's like in the real world.
I live for that fucking song.
Yeah. Well, see, that's a true story.
Really?
It's like Butcher. It's a true.
Yeah,
Butcher
and Fast Eddie. Oh my God, these were things that I really would getting you to tell the stories of some of the lyrics. What about Mansell Madness? What is that?
Maybe we should do another part later, and I'll explain the songs.
That would be that. I would love that so much. Where you go, pick 5 songs and tell the stories of the songs.
Well, you pick them.
Yeah, thank you. That would be a treasure.
Mansell Madness is a down in Springfield Avenue, it's back off the cross, right?
King's
this red
Cross.
light area
Okay,
King's Cross. So frequented by ne'er-do-wells and criminals and prostitutes and drug dealers, and it was this tiny little club. Bands used to play there. We played there a few times, and it was called the Mansell Room, Manzil Room, and what does it say? You've spent too many nights up the bar.
Holding up the bar.
Holding up the bar, that's right, yeah.
In Texas, I think they call that belly up.
Yeah.
Hey, put your belly up, I wanted to talk about the song Texas, but we can go there another time. So
because that was inspired by ZZ Top, obviously.
Yeah, makes sense.
When I say obviously, I mean, I remember saying to Dusty, God rest your soul, Dusty.
Yeah, what an amazing human being.
Oh, yeah, lovely, man. I mean, they all are. They're just fucking amazing. I love that band. They're probably, if not my favourite band. I mean, my 2 favourite guitar players, my absolute 2 favourite guitar players is Leslie West and Billy Gibbons.
Wow.
I don't think there's 2 finer blues players in the world, Yeah, I think Mountain are just fucking. He as a guitar player, he's a mind-boggling, skull-crushing, just fucking.
Oh yeah.
He goes places, where angels fear to tread. I mean, because Leslie West, he was a real rogue. He was a real outlaw. He was just it was like watching something that was not particularly physically real. And I get the same inspiration from watching and listening to Bill. Anyway, I remember saying to Dusty, I said, because we toured with them in Europe. This is where we first met them.
What year was that? What year?
81, 82.
Okay, all right.
They'd had some time off, I think, while Frank dealt with his substance abuses. They did the album they came back with was the one where they're on the sand dune. They've got bags of dope.
Rio Grande Mud or
no, later. It'd be early 80s.
Not Eliminator.
No, pre that.
Right before Eliminator.
Yeah,
it was right before Eliminator.
I don't know that.
I can see the cover now. It's got the song "Party on the Patio" on it. Is that a Tube Snake Boogie Party on the Patio?
Yeah.
I forget the title of the album.
I don't know the title of the record, but those are great fucking songs.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah. Was it El something like El Dobo or
El Loco? No.
But anyway, because I remember years later when we were on tour,
Texans.
Yeah.
And I said to them, well, the album cover, and because how quirky Top are. They're fucking, it's quirky as all fuck. And it was the bags they've got on the cover. It's supposed to be marijuana, and there's a cop. There's a cop in the chasing them or holding them up or whatever. I'm just sort of trying to visualize the cover, but Actually, one of us should be Googling this, I suppose,
that's what Jason's doing right now.
Looking it up.
We're Texans. We should
guilty.
know this. I mean, we should know.
I feel bad. We're in the middle of a fucking interview talking about rock and roll.
How is it that we know more about Rose Tattoo than we know about ZZ Top?
That's fucked up.
I got some. We might save it for next time, but I got a couple of fucking absolute classic top stories.
Tell us one. Tell us one right now.
Okay, we got them really fucked up one night on Australian beer. I found some in a supermarket. Well, the road crew found some. And so we introduced them to Australian beer, which is marginally, it was in those days, stronger in alcohol content.
I got it right. It was El Loco.
El Loco.
I got it right. It was El Loco. Yeah.
So anyway, we got them fucked up on beer. And anyway, we were down, I think we were actually in Texas or New Mexico or somewhere. It was down there, but I'm pretty sure it was Texas. And they had this biker bar that they love to frequent, which is another story because I never knew they carried guns until that day. But because when you go in, you have to check your guns, right?
Right.
So anyway, but there was another, and I remember they took us to this, we had a couple of days off, and they said, we're taking you guys out now. So we went to this place. And we drove out of town, and, there was a line of pickups and like 30 or 40 Harley Davidsons and this big fucking barn, and it had a big neon sign, and it said, beer, beer, beef, something, beer, beef, bourbon, and boobs. Mm. And we go in there, and, there was all these, what became Hooters, like, all these scantily, with little denim skirts and shorts and cowboy boots and fucking tits out here, and it was fantastic. It was full, and the menu had two things on it. It was steak and sausages. That was it. And that's so they brought them out in trays, to your table. So I remember sitting next to Dusty, and he said, "I've ordered you a depth charge." And I went, "Oh, yeah, cool. What's that?" He goes, "Hang on." So they bring out, this woman comes out, 2 jugs of beer, puts them on the table. And then these, steins, so like a beer stein. Mm-hmm. And this other girl comes out with this tray of those big fuck-off shot glasses, right? So got a single or a double nip, I suspect obviously double. And she pours all the bourbons, and then the other girls pour in the beers, and they put the beer down in front of each of them. And then they pick up the bourbon and they drop it into the beer.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
A depth charge.
Yeah.
So Dusty says to me, "So come on, Texas style." So, because we've, like I said, a week or so before, we stitched them up on Australian beer. No, back at home, we drink this like fucking water, we're into the fucking beer. And so they were too, and they got really fucked up. It was so funny. So anyway, here we are at the beers and bourbon and boobs and beef. And after about 4 or 5 of these, and I still drink bourbon and beer together. I've straight bourbon with a beer chaser. Mm. Because when you drink a beer, it's infusing coming out of the shot glass is the bourbon. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you've ever done this, but it's a fucking magical process. But you are going to get fucked up.
Yeah.
So anyway, I've had about 3 or 4, maybe 5 of these.
Oh shit!
Fucking, And I thought, I'm going to have a piss. Where and said, it's down there, and there's big sign, gents, There's a big hall. There was a band playing down the other end, etc. Later on, actually, we were so drunk and had a jam, but all of us did, them included. But they were well known in this place, so people knew who they were, and they were being really respectful, just walking past and paying their respects and stuff. So I went to stand up, and they had bench seats, right? So I had to throw my leg over. And I went to stand up, and it was like, fucking, whoa, this is I was like, the place is spinning around, and I thought, fucking, And I remember, I think it might have been Dusty, but he grabbed me by the arm. He said, "Steady on, son." So like, it's just to get your bearings. But I was fucked. I didn't realise while I was sitting at the table, I didn't realise that, you know, this bourbon and beer, I'd never done that before, you know.
Yeah.
And that's what, I don't know whether I discovered bourbon there, but I put it down to bourbon, you know, because I used to drink vodka. But then, you know, I used to drink tequila too in Australia. But I can't remember drinking bourbon until we went on tour with them.
Wow.
Yeah.
Easy Top, man.
Oh yeah, but you know, we had some great stories. I remember first time they ever heard us. Like Dusty would always say, you know, you got to. He loved the song "Who's Got the Cash." Yeah, God rest his soul. But yeah, I remember the first time they heard us play, which was Scarred for Life tour. So it was a couple of years later.
Yeah.
And he goes, "Man, Texas." He said, "What's that about?" I said, "It's about you guys." And he said, "Really?" I said, "Yeah, really." I said, because they wrote a song called "Bad Boy," which Dusty used to sing.
Yeah.
Well, you probably know that.
Right.
Not that I imagine that it was written about us, but yeah, we wrote, you know, I was trying to remember the lyric, but it was things that, it's like, you know, like in their film clips, you know, chicks, you know, long-legged girls with, you know, big titties going down to Texas, going
down to Texas.
Women,
Yeah, that's right. Let the big-breasted women grow or something.
Yeah,
like
you know,
that.
so that's all. That's all about the top and their clips and.
Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. See, that's amazing. All the way from Australia, Texas meets Australia, and because of rock and roll, that's really cool. And you've got these stories and this brotherhood because of it. That's awesome.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, and you're right about the brotherhood, because I mean, I feel so affectionate towards those guys. Even, you know, like the Aerosmith, it was Perry wasn't there the tour we did, but yeah, I remember Stephen said to me one night, he said, "Over here, I'm considered to be a bad boy." He said,
"Yeah."
So he said, because I was sort of going. It was going back to the, you know, throwing the money in the cans, and even at one stage they threw chairs on stage.
Fuck.
And it was Stephen. He sort of said, "Oh man," he said, "they're just not used to it. You know, it's something really different for them." And he said, "But fuck them. You know, like it's real. It's just keep doing it." And, you know, like it's not like we were ready to give up, but we were certainly like, wow, fuck, what are we doing wrong? You know?
Yeah.
And I feel like, not to become a music journalist real quick to review the show, but, you know, Aerosmith is, even at that time, even though they are true bad boys, I mean, God, Stephen was probably still really fucked up at that time, huh?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah.
He was fucked up.
Yeah.
So what I was going to say is, compared to the Tats, I mean, Aerosmith is kind of this, they had songs on the radio, really kind of slick compared to Rose Tattoo. So here's this
They're
almost
great songs.
Oh my God, yeah. And here's this almost punk rock band looking like you guys fucking did. You know, and Aerosmith is kind of, you know, kind of cool and boas and, you know, a little glammy, and you guys are coming out like double fisted with a sledgehammer, and people don't know how to take that. I don't care what part of the world you're in. They didn't know how to take that, especially in 81. I mean, sure, if you go to see the Sex Pistols, you know what you're going to get out of it. If you went to see the fucking Stooges, you know what you're going to get out of it. But they're going to see Aerosmith, and here's these guys' Rose Tattoo, and it's like fucking aliens come out and with shotguns, you know?
Yeah. And, it looks like a jailbreak.
Yeah. Well, I got to tell you, again, giving credit where credit's due. I mean, okay, we'd already worked with the Top in Europe. So it was the very early 80s, 80, 81, 80, I think it was. And so we formed a friendship and a relationship there.
Yeah.
So they knew what they were getting when they, because they said, well, they knew we were in United States of America, and so they said, like, we're going to do a tour. We want the Tats to come and open up for us. So they knew what they were getting. So to their credit, yeah. Now I know that this is a true story. Stephen told me. He said, like, when they were going out, they review suggestions for an opening act, and we were labelled in those days special guests.
Right.
And sometimes there was a band on before us. So there was a band on, and then we were in the middle slot, and there would be Aerosmith would be on. So they chose us. They saw, they heard the music, they saw the clips, and they said, yeah, that's what we want. So to their credit, so they're largely responsible. If we enjoy any sort of, as I said before, we realise it's a cult following, but if we enjoy any sort of, notoriety, if you like, or following, it's in a large part due to those blokes, those bands, saying, we want to work, we want the Tats to do our shows.
In '87, I saw Guns N' Roses play a small venue in San Antonio, holds about 500 or 600 people. And they were, Appetite for Destruction was on the rise, but it hadn't quite, this is in '87, it hadn't quite broke yet, My friend, I'm down there with a friend of mine from Austin, where me and Dave live. We live in Austin, Texas. And I'm there with friends, and my friend Gilbert has his Scarred for Life t-shirt, Tour 81, that he got at the Aerosmith Rose Tattoo Show. And he saw you guys in '81, so this would have been 5 or 6 years later. And he's wearing the shirt, and Guns' bus is parked there, and Slash walks off and walks right up to my friend. And we're like, holy shit, it's Slash, and he walks up to my buddy Gilbert, and he goes, how much do you want for the shirt? And long story short,
I've been giving him free shirts for years.
Well, nowadays, but back. But he didn't. This is just before I think you guys had become friendly, you and Slash and the Gunners.
Yes,
But Gilbert did not sell Slash his Scarred for Life T-shirt.
My man.
That's right. He's gonna flip out when he hears that this is happening right now. He's gonna be what? So.
Angry, I wanted to know. We were talking about your look. Especially in '82 when you're opening for Aerosmith, and a lot of American audiences are kind of a little taken by surprise by what they see.
Really.
What do you remember? What do you remember about getting your first tattoo? And then what did you think when it kind of became the norm, and it's like it's almost mandatory that everybody has sleeve tattoos now in rock and roll? But you guys, I remember seeing the album cover.
Neck and face.
Dave. Yeah.
Neck and face.
Right.
If you don't have your backs of your hands, your neck and your face,
right?
You fucking, you're just pedestrian. You're ordinary.
Yeah. But I remember seeing your album covers in the late '70s and early '80s, and thinking to myself, "Oh my God, these guys are scary looking, man. You guys really look like a gang of prisoners." and then it kind of became the norm, and still is. So I wanted to ask you, what do you remember about getting your first tattoo, and what did you think when tattoos sort of became commonplace?
I got my first tattoo, 17, just lost my teenage queen. Then I took a stand for an outlaw's life. I was 17 or around about that age, so it was illegal. And there was a tattooist in the next suburb down from ours that tattooed underage kids, and it was known to do so. Had a studio at the back of his house. I was having trouble with my then girlfriend, she was much in demand. There was a lot of really cool guys after her, etc. And so I thought I'd get her name tattooed on me, and I did. And yeah, well, I was maybe I was a bit older. Maybe I was 18. Anyway, she left me. Regardless of the tattoo, and I mean, it was a great honour for me to put her name on my arm. But that was my first, and then on the other, and it was a rose, a rose and an anchor.
Yeah. And
on the other shoulder was a black rose and a tombstone in memory of the drummer who in my first real band, and he died at a very early age, like his early 20s, as I said. So yeah, they were my first two. I remember talking to Tony Cohen, who's by the way, I'm not finished yet. I'm not done yet with ink. But a year or so ago, I was talking to Tony, who tattoos me, and the fad aspect, because once upon a time, only outlaws, whether they be bikers or people in the army usually, or the Air Force or Navy obviously, got tattooed. And he's a very old school, as you can imagine, ex-biker, about my age, he's been tattooing all his life. And he said, it's made us all rich, the fat aspect. He said, but it doesn't sit well with me. He said, because that's why because he's at a very prestigious shop in and around Sydney for as long as I can remember. And he's one of the godfathers of tattooing in this country. Legendary guy. And he said, I let when they come in for the one colour coverall, he said, I let the kids there's about half a dozen young tattooists that work at his shop. And he said, I let the kids do all that shit. He said, but he does the traditional body stuff, like he does body suits and, but he won't tattoo. He's done a couple of backs of hands, which are mainly the traditional flash, like roses or skulls or whatever. He won't do necks. He won't do faces.
We'll wrap this up, but I wanna read you some lyrics that I've written. Okay.
Okay.
It won't take very long. This is called "She Dances Evil." Jezebel,
by Broken Teeth.
Yeah, by my band Broken Teeth. Says, Jezebel can't walk so well after a night on the town. Must be the poison stinging in her ears. She'll be the death of me and bring me down. Jezebel, she was 17, made me feel cool just like James Dean. Well, she was hot on the spot. Her heart beats faster when I'm really mean. Chorus, she dances evil. She blows like dynamite, and she's all mine. She dances evil. She got rhythm, and she's right on time. Here's the best part. Number 3 made a mess of me. Must be the voices singing in her ears. If it was you, what would Angry do? He'd say, I'm never gonna suffer a straight man's fears.
In honor
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I'm just going to tell you this. I love you, sir. I love you.
Thank you so much.
That's one of my favorite Broken Teeth songs, by the way. Yeah. What would Angry do? Yeah. And you know what, Angry, when before the plague derailed your tour, Jason's band Broken Teeth was going to open for you on a couple of dates here in Texas.
Excellent.
So I hope we can reschedule that and make that happen again.
We shall now.
We're working on it.
I want to hear that song played live.
Yeah.
Thank you, mate. That's just
yeah.
That's a great compliment. A great compliment.
You're not mad because I stole your lyrics.
Certainly not. No.
I mean, maybe 6 or 7 words of it.
I actually before that saying that I was scrambling to remember.
Right.
I think it might have been Oscar Wilde or someone like him, but what was the wording again? This serious form.
The saying is imitation is the greatest form of flattery, or something along those lines.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Well, I have an inkling it's Oscar Wilde, but actually, one of my favourite sayings of his, I think, is very relevant to today. Is that fashion is such a disgusting concept that they have to change it every 6 months.
Yeah.
And brothers, we will leave it there. Look, I no pressure whatsoever, but I've enjoyed today immensely. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you
for everything that's been said and your patience and in dealing with someone who's a verbalist by profession.
The honor is ours.
Thank you. Thank you so much. If you would like to, again, like at some stage, do it under like a follow-up and we talk about the songs and those sort of things. But I kind of like, it's terrific. I mean, isn't it? I mean, it's wonderful when you establish something with someone that you don't know previously, and all of a sudden you feel very comfortable in their company, and you want to talk. You want to talk shit, so to speak, but good shit.
Yeah.
You want to talk about music. You want to talk about influence and tell stories and those kind of things.
And it's respectful to do such. I feel like it's an old pastime that has been around thousands of years around the campfire. It's tribal.
Yeah, but Jason, you put it very succinctly earlier on. We are dinosaurs. We are part of, and we realise that, and it's okay. Yeah. Because as George Harrison so beautifully put, all things must pass, and that's a wonderful old. It's not just a philosophic stance, but it's a spiritual. It comes from a spiritual law, the root of that saying. But everything has a time. For every time there's a season. It's that wonderful area of understanding that. And I understand fully that the music will live on.
Yeah.
But like you've had your day, you've had your moment in the sun, whatever poetically you want to dress it. But the thing about it is that and I think it's a wonderful part of life, and you do. It sounds like an old codger sort of a fucking thing to say, but
that's fine.
You can only discover these things with a certain amount of road behind you.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like the great old wisdom. Youth is wasted on the young.
Yeah.
That goes back a long, long, long way. I think that might even had its roots in Greek early philosophy.
Yeah.
But of course, it's not wasted at all. But it's would I be young again? Certain aspects, rock hard erections. That devil may care sort of.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But,
yeah.
Anyway, boys, I'll leave it with you. I got to go. Sorry, but
no, Angry. I wanted to say real quick. One of the reasons we do this podcast is because we love speaking to our heroes, and if we're lucky, we walk away feeling like we got to know the person a little more than we did before we started. And that, sir, is exactly what happened today. So thank you for your time and spending it with us and being such a great guest. We always have respected you for the music, and now I feel like we have a kinship, and we really got to learn a lot about you, and we appreciate that. So thank you.
We certainly do have that kinship after today. Yeah, that's what I meant before about feeling comfortable in one another's company. It's like we're not acquaintances anymore. We're mates. soul brothers.
Wow.
In the true sense of the word, And I wouldn't mind if Catherine, obviously you're in touch with, or someone that works for you is in touch with Catherine, because it'd be really, really nice if I could get some of that recorded product of yours, Jason, to
I would love nothing
listen.
more to send you whatever format you want. I can send digital links for you to just click on and listen in your headgear there, or I can send CDs or vinyl or whatever you would like, sir.
Yeah, I'd like the CD because I'm stuck in the past.
Yeah, I mean, it'll take a fucking month to get to you, but that's
I don't care.
Yeah, I don't care either. You're all worth it, my man.
Oh, thank you.
Angry, thank you so much for your time. It's been great. What an honor for us. You made our days, and we can't thank you enough. On behalf of my co-host, Jason McMaster, I'm Metal Dave Glessner, along with our very special guest today, Angry Anderson, on the Talk Louder podcast.
Till next time.
Thank you, sir.
I like that.
Appreciate it.
Till we meet again.
Thank you.